Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2022 film Men. It's an Alex Garland film, so if you know Alex Garland stuff, this isn't going to be for everyone. It truly is not. Like, I kind of view his career as his earliest stuff was the most accessible, and like as he's making more films it becomes less accessible and you need to read more into the film. It's way more metaphorical. So Men, I believe, is his most metaphorical and weird, and for people who don't like to have to like really dig into a film and pick apart those metaphors and scenes and what the subtext and themes really are, you're probably not going to be a huge fan of the film. But then again, maybe you are. But this is a no spoiler review, obviously, because it's a newer film. So, but I will say at the very end, I'm going to talk about kind of like the themes and the subtext within the film for anyone who kind of wants that out of this review. So I'll give like a little bit of a warning before I really start doing that stuff. But Men, written and directed by Alex Garland. What else has Alex Garland done? He wrote 28 Days Later, Sunshine, and Dread. One of those is not like the other. And then he wrote and directed Ex Machina and Annihilation. I think as far as everything that like he like wrote and directed, that Ex Machina is like the most accessible to people, and then Annihilation gets pretty weird. I loved it. I love both those films. I like this film, but it is I definitely like Ex Machina and Annihilation a lot more than this film, but I still enjoyed this film to a degree. Quick synopsis. Don't want to give you too much, but it's basically about a woman who is no longer in a relationship, who kind of wants to get away, go to the countryside, stay in like an Airbnb type situation to kind of just relax, decompress, kind of get things together mentally, and you know, kind of be good, start being good to herself in a sense. And it's about all the characters, men, that she ends up meeting while she's there, and how things eventually start devolving into a horror film, obviously. So that's all I'm going to give you on that, because I don't want to really ruin anything with the film. The very first scene is very cryptic, and it does raise a lot of questions, but just know that those questions will be answered. All the questions will be answered, basically. The scene sets up just a mystery, in essence. You're like, what is the purpose of this? I was prepared for it not to be fully explained because Alex Garland, but it is actually fully explained, so that's good. So some people will be very, very excited about that. But it's a good way to kind of hook people in when you set up a scene like that, where it's kind of like, what is going on here? It piques interest very early, like from the get-go, so that's nice. There's a character who ends up being introduced very, very early on who is delightfully off. That's kind of like the best way I can put it. He's proper, he's nice, he's goofy, but there's this bit of like a sinister tinge to the character as well. And that's with a lot of characters in this. And this is the point where I need to kind of like point out the acting in the film. Acting is extremely strong in this film. Jessie Buckley did a phenomenal job as the main actress in the film, and Rory Kinnear did a phenomenal job playing multiple roles. Both their jobs were very, very tough in different ways. Buckley's job was extremely tough because she had to hit a range of emotions, and they were not easy from what I could tell, and she nailed it. And Kinnear's job was really hard because he had to hit a range of characters, and I feel like that's not easy either. But there is a reason that he's cast in so many roles within the film, and I will kind of get a little bit to that when I talk about kind of like the themes and the subtext, but it's still not going to spoil like the actual events of the film. So just know that. From a deeper and emotional standpoint, the film gets pretty real pretty quickly. So it's not starting off on a light note. It is a very kind of like somber, emotionally impactful type film. Probably even more so for females than for males, just because of the perspective within the film and the kind of point of the film, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, there's beautiful scenery. I mean, one of the big things you need to know, and I'm sure a lot of people assume if you've seen Alex Garland stuff, if you're going into an Alex Garland film, one thing you can really expect is for it to be shot beautifully and for everything to look beautiful. The scenery is great. They did great location scouting to make it look like a gorgeous film. Directing's wonderful. Cinematography is wonderful. The music is good. A little bit overbearing from time to time, but not too bad. But how it's composed is quite good. About 30 minutes in, you start asking yourself, what the hell is going on? About 30 minutes in is when it starts getting really weird. And let me tell you, it backs off a bit, but then it goes, it comes back, obviously, and then by the time we get to the end of the film, it gets very weird. And it just, it's weird, 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 weird. So be prepared for the weird. If you love that stuff, I'm down with it. Just a warning. Just saying. About 1 hour and 10 minutes in, there's actually a pretty gnarly gore gag. Now, I say gore gag just so people know, not as like I just use that as like a coverall to hit something that like looks really good and it's like a, gore related something. I'm not saying gore gag in the sense that like it's supposed to be funny, because it's not. So there is something that's really effects wise pulled off extremely well, and it's like it looks like it's sometimes done practical and sometimes done CGI, and the CGI for the most part in this is well done. One of the big reasons for that being they kind of cover up some of the not great about it with having it in lower lighting, which is always a smart move in my opinion when dealing with CGI. Kind of covers up the rough edges, but yeah, pretty well done. Pretty well done. There's a sequence that just keeps going, and it seems very gratuitous. This is towards the end of the film. It does change a little bit in what's going on during that sequence, but it's kind of like the same thing going on. And it kind of started to make me feel like the filmmaker was taking the intellect of the audience for granted and kind of trying to be like, no, I need to keep doing this to like make people understand what I'm going for here. But I mean, that's underestimating the intellect of your audience, and that's something I really hate with film. So that moment got me feeling a little about the film, but the point that's trying to be made is good, and it is a good scene for the film. I just think it should have been cut down. They didn't need it to just keep going and going and going. Now, like I said, like it changes a little bit over the sequence, which is a bit helpful, but overall still not what I would have done or would have liked. The ending does give you some pretty solid closure, I will say. I did enjoy the ending enough. I do think they could have gone a little bit bigger, but the impact is there. I don't know how satisfied everyone's going to feel about it, but I felt it was pretty satisfying for me. This film could have been cut down some, and it should have been, to be honest. It's like an hour and 40-minute runtime with the credits, and I think they probably could have cut 10 minutes out of it or so, and probably should have done that, because the pacing does suffer from time to time. Not terribly, because I've definitely had way worse films I've watched pacing-wise, but pacing's suffers a little bit. But, that's also like Alex Garland kind of does that, and one of the things that really does help is how good the film looks. With slower paced films like this, if it looks awesome and the directing's done interestingly and the cinematography's done interestingly and the shot locations look interesting and beautiful, that helps because you have things to kind of like engage you and to look at. But I still think it should have been cut down a little bit. Gonna repeat it. This is a film that many people are just gonna find to be too weird. Like I said, if you're not a person who likes to like dig into these types of films and really try and figure things out, probably not going to be the film for you. You're not going to be huge on this one. So, but if you did watch the film and you didn't like it and you don't want to think about it too much and you do want to talk about some of like the metaphorical stuff and stuff like that, you can put some comments down there and we can talk about it, because you could do spoilers in the comments. That's fine. Go ahead. So now I'm going to start to get into some of like the subtext and thematic stuff. It's not a ton, but like I said, I'm not going to ruin events of the film. I'm just going to kind of talk about what subtext and thematic stuff is in there. So here we go. This film goes along with many films that have been coming out recently that kind of show a horrific vision of what it can be like to live as a woman in a world that's dominated by men, which is most likely the reason for the title of the film. Yeah, there have been a bunch of films coming out like this, and it makes sense because horror as a genre has always reflected the ills and the anxieties of society at whatever time they're coming out. So obviously right now we're dealing with a lot of issues having to do with, you know, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, but, people not having comfort in life because of other people. And in this instance, it's very much females not being able to like really live a comfortable, nice life because their life is in many ways dominated by males, and not just necessarily males directly, but like systems and establishments that have been created by males in the images of males and run by males. So it's literally not a world created for them in their own image. Much like a lot of other people, people who are black, people who are queer, people who are Asian, people who are Latino in the United States. Like, these are all things, like, unless you're a white male, like, white males created everything in the country. Like, that's a fact, basically, in the sense of like the establishment and societal structure and all that stuff. So this film kind of gets at some of that stuff, or a lot of that stuff, honestly. So it's not going to be for everyone. Not everyone's going to love that, but it's interesting to me for sure. There are some religious aspects that come into this film that point to the filmmaker's idea of where the biggest problem for women in society originates. I'm not going to go further than that because I think I could get into some kind of dangerous ground about talking about religion and stuff, and I have like definite opinions on religion. And you can probably guess what they are, as I've said before in one or two of my reviews, that I was never raised with religion in my life. But yeah, there is that aspect to this film. So once again, I think that's something that some people really are not going to like about the film, or what they decide the film is saying about that. But yeah. There's also a lot in the film pointing to how systematic versus systemic. Pointing out how systemic the main issue in this film actually is. That gratuitously long scene I was talking about kind of is the main set piece to really drive that stuff home. And like I said, it goes on way too long because like as soon as it started, I'm like, yes, I get the point. And then it kept going and I'm like, okay, got the point a long time ago. Okay. But yeah, that is a very important point with what they're talking about here. So anyway, I would love to know everyone's opinions on this film. Go ahead and put it in the comments. If this is a film that you strongly love or you strongly hate, don't let emotions get a hold of your language when you type something out. I'm not saying that in the sense of like people using profanity or anything like that. I'm saying it in the sense of speak from a perspective of these are legitimate criticisms of the film. These are legitimate things that were great about the film, because that's what I kind of try to push within the film. I don't want people bringing like bias, like ridiculous outside bias into the film and applying it, because you always have those people who will just tie it into some sort of like stupid conspiracy theory or their own personal grievances or something like that. And it's just like, we're talking about a film, and we're talking about how a film's constructed, and it's the vision of the filmmaker. So let's talk about that. Let's not start to bring in other stuff that we really don't need to, because then, comments get ridiculous and people fight about it, and I'm not about that on this channel. I do not want that stuff. It's not fun. We want to be relatively positive, although we talk about negative things from time to time. But anyway, that's enough of that. Like I said, comments, you can do spoilers in the comments. Would love to know people's opinions, and just give me like a sentence or two what you did or didn't like about the film. And then subscribe to my channel. That's your best way to repay me if you like any of my content, including this video. I would greatly appreciate it. Also hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing a good amount each week. But regardless, thanks for taking your time to watch this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.